everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, off Motor City Badmouth. Glad to have everybody with us tonight. JB Ellis will be contributing as he sent us his comments of what's going on. Meanwhile, I want to welcome the crew, and then we're going to start off with some tough news, but it gets a little bit better. We're going to lead off with Jacob Christner. Welcome back to the show, Jacob.
What's up? How you doing?
And we're doing all right. George Eichhorn, welcome back.
Hey, good to see you guys again, and lady.
And Mike Santos is on here for the Wednesday night show for the first time. He'll be back on next Wednesday night as well. Good to have Mike on, our hockey expert. Of course, I know Mike has a lot of other things he can talk about. So next week's show will probably incorporate a little bit more variety in addition to what's on Frozen Pond. Thanks for being with us, Mike.
Yeah, sure thing, Scott. Anything that has to do with punching or wrestling or beating people up, I'm in.
Oh boy, that's what I like to hear.
At the end of this show, you're going to want to do more of it.
Really, you're right. And Mike Whitaker joins us.
Evening, everyone. How's it going?
All right. And last but not least, Candy's getting a taste of the Frozen Pond and a lot more.
Great to be here. Great to talk sports with you fine gentlemen.
All right. Well, unfortunately, breaking news occurred just before we went on air. And it's tough to talk about this one, but Steve McMichael, the legendary Chicago Bear, died at the age of 67 due to ALS. Been fighting this battle. Actually, was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic in 2020, opted to get other opinions, and was officially diagnosed the second one in 2021. This is tough. It really is. The guy, as Jacob mentioned in our early chat, was at about 285 when he was diagnosed and ended up declining to a point where he probably reached about 120, if I heard correctly. But ALS is brutal. It just simply is. And what else can you say? And I do want to go ahead and preface something that George Hallis mentioned, and then I'll turn it over to Jacob, because this is very, very, very important, because he was originally drafted by the New England Patriots, and he had some traits that the Patriots didn't really like. In fact, I'll say that some of these traits, Michael recalled walking into founder George Allen's office. It was like walking into a 1920 gangster movie when he was signed, James Cagney, when he signed the Chicago. The pop-up there made it clear. You know what he said to me? Michael said, "I've heard what kind of a dirty rat you are in practice. Don't change, Steve." They didn't like him in New England, but boy, he was a hit in Chicago. Jacob, you're from that area. Please elaborate.
Big Bears fan the last 40 years. I stopped mourning McMichael a long time ago. Like the minute he was diagnosed with ALS, it is a devastating, ridiculous. The guy lived on as Dusty Rhodes would say, live at the end of the lake, but baby. He did. All the stories, everything. You want to listen to a Ric Flair story, just talk about McMichael, he can go on for hours. Going 200 miles per hour down a highway while having a case of beer. You hear it all. I mean, jumping police steals, all that kind of stuff. There's a billion of them. He lived life on the end of a lightning bolt. Only thing I ever said when I heard he had ALS was just do it quick. Let him go to sleep. I stopped mourning, and I started getting angry because everybody keep coming in, putting pictures of this guy who was a beast, a hoss, a monster, and just wasted away, and we kept having to see it. And I started getting angry at that, and I just started erasing the pictures, everything, just kind of scrolling by. I don't want to see McMichael like that. You want to remember the guy who was terrible at wrestling, but he was part of this Four Horsemen. You want to remember him as the Chicago Bears, one of the leaders of that defense. You want to remember that guy who was part of that defense for 10 years. Then 6 of them, they were top 5. 2 of them, they were first. You want to remember that. You don't want to see people waste away. And he ended up getting that. I can't believe they wanted to keep him around that long, to prop him up, have Dan Hampton doing this to take a picture while he's wasted away to bones. So there's my deal with that. I had a problem. I stopped the morning a long time ago, but I can say this with him. He lived an forget the last 5 years. He lived an unbelievable life. Unbelievable. We can all wish for that. We just don't wish how it ended.
Okay, let me address something in the chat room real quickly. Put it up there, Candy. Joshua Doro being, is this the South Florida Tribune? I expect a lot of Panthers lightning talk. I wouldn't say a lot, but it'll definitely be mentioned as the show goes on. We still have other hockey topics we want to get to, but mark my word, we will not be ignoring the Panthers. They will be on as the show goes on. So hang in there, Joshua. All right, George, what are your thoughts about the legacy of Steve McMichael?
Well, yeah, 4 years. So he announced he had ALS in, excuse me, in 2021. And then he died almost 4 years to the day. Very sad. That's a very sad, and like you said, Scott, a very, very tough disease to suffer through. I'm sure it's a blessing for his family that he's moving on, but it's always hard. I mean, he won the Super Bowl with the Bears, as you mentioned, two-time All-Pro, two-time Pro Bowl, Football Hall of Fame, class of 24. And then, of course, the professional wrestling, that he did, and tried doing some announcing and did a little bit of that too with wrestling. But yeah, he was he epitomized those Bears teams. Tough, tough as nails. Very difficult to, if you're the opposition trying to get around these guys on the Bears. Of course, we all know the great years the Bears have had, and it's really sad. And again, I want to send my support and sympathy to all his fans, and you too, Jacob, and all the Bears fans out there.
Well, I grew up with it. Thank you. I grew up with that was the team I grew up with, 84.
Sure.
So then you get 1 year later, you get everything like that. People wonder why I become a Bears fan, considering all of the past years have been miserable. But
yeah,
I grew up, and if they would have been the same as we remember from the 70s and done something like that, I probably would have been a Steelers fan because my brother had a Steelers coat. So but the Bears were just that good, and the Steelers were just not very good. So it ended up being Chicago. But if it wasn't for the Monsters of the Midway, if it wasn't for Ditka, it wasn't for anything, the Bears would be the worst team of the last 60 years. I don't want to hear anything about, they were overrated, all that crap. It takes a lot to win a playoffs and done everything. And yeah, they should have had more decisions made. Who cares? But those were special teams.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll turn over to Mike Santos.
Well, I mean, I didn't grow up in Chicago, but I certainly was a fan of that team. The era was crazy. I mean, the 80s, go back into the 70s, the teams that were successful had these guys that, like Jacob said, lived on the edge, not just played on the edge, but lived on the edge. I think of the Raiders as a comparable team, just, before the Bears in the 70s, whether it was, Ted Hendricks or Lyle Alzado, who died tragically of cancer, right? And then I think of this Bears team and the tragedy that they've had, with this, but even beforehand with Walter Payton. I think we remember these guys more because they were so, dare I say, full of life off the field as well as on the field. And so when something happens to these guys, you are shocked because of their antics off the field and the things they were involved in, you really start to feel that they're invincible. And then you realize whether it's cancer that struck down Alzado, right, or now the ALS with McMichael, that, in the end, they're just like us,
Well, I'll say this: Steve Gleason is fighting the battle real well for New Orleans. Thankfully, he's alive. If we want to sit here and talk about some tragedies in Chicago, Brian Piccolo was certainly one that went way too soon, but we won't get into that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you talked about
Gleason's another story.
And Lyle is Zeta. Don't want to get too far off topic. We have a lot to cover for sure. Mike Whitaker, some thoughts about Mr. McMichael.
Honestly, I can say I don't wasn't as familiar with his career because I didn't really start following football growing up. But I mean, obviously I do now, but not as much when I was a kid. But yeah, just a very tough situation. Unfortunately, I've known people who have passed away from ALS, and it's kind of like you mentioned, it is so difficult kind of seeing them completely the opposite from the person that you once knew, and you know their body's literally wasting away, and it's just a very, very tough situation. And certainly condolences to his family and friends, and you know hopefully there can be more progression with helping to fight the disease and to eventually reduce the number of people who have it, and so we don't have to continuously see things like that. So
Okay. I will turn over to Candy / JB. She wears both hats tonight. Go ahead, Candy.
So I'm going to start with me first. As a Packer fan, obviously I was never happy when McMichael played against us with the Bears. He had 8 sacks during the 85 season, and he added another during their Super Bowl win. He finished his career with 95 sacks. He had 842 career tackles, 13 forced fumbles, 17 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, and 3 recorded safeties in 213 games. His 92.5 sacks with the Bears ranks second in team history to Dent. One of the things that sticks out to my mind is I remember head coach Mike Ditka said McMichael was the toughest player that he ever coached. To see him once he got ALS and to see all the pictures, because we've all seen pictures of him and what that disease does to somebody is disheartening. I mean, it's just sad. It's sad to see somebody like that.
Well, one thing, Candy, I wanted to say this real fast too. No way in heck, the way that the condition that Mike Dick is in right now, no way he would have ever thought he's going to have to go to another funeral because he's close. But there's this, and I'm like, there's to me in life, there's no business of ever just lingering like this. It's why I don't want to talk about Steve Gleason much either, because no one should be able to linger like that. This is ridiculous.
But as much as I disliked seeing him against my team, I also respect how well of a player he was on the field and how much his presence dominated the game. So those are my thoughts. Now I'm going to transition and put my JB hat on.
Look.
Good luck.
He said, having gotten to know Missy, the wife, and seeing what she was like, he could sense that she was always full of life. McMichael was such a big part of the 85 Bears, of those Bears teams that were really good in the mid-'80s. He lived his life to the fullest, and to see him in such a debilitating state was such a hard thing to see. And he's sure for his family it was. He's at peace now and not struggling anymore, but it's still hard to imagine someone so strong suffering the way he did. The amount of support he had from his fans was amazing, from Chicago and the NFL.
Okay. What I want to do right now is last week, I didn't have the American dollars for the Alexander Barkov fine, so I have a responsibility to put those numbers out there because it was on my mind when we signed off. I'm only going to put it out there, and nobody has to comment. All I know is that's a pretty expensive speeding ticket. So I'm following up with it that he had a speeding ticket that in Euro dollars went $46,675, and in American currency, it's 54,000 US dollars. So there you have it. Now we have the American conversion. It bothered me so much I had to put it on there. As to what happened to JB, he's not here tonight, but he's sending us his answers. He should be back next Wednesday. All right, so I just wanted to get that off my check. $54 grand for a speeding ticket. I couldn't even do that if I tried. I don't have it. I wouldn't be bothered to try with my medical conditions. That's okay. I got my pilot and I get behind the wheel when I get the itch to do it. We'll get that out of the way. Now, I want to congratulate my friend Kenny Albert, who landed the New York Rangers full-time play-by-play job. And as I'll say, I had Kenny on one of my shows before, and we've been friends for a long time. And first thing he said to me is, "Thank you very much for support." And I'm just, and we exchanged text messages for 3 or 4 times. So, Mike, obviously, if anybody knows about Kenny Albert, what are your thoughts about Kenny Albert replacing the legendary Sam Rosen?
Yeah, well, it's I think it's natural. I've known Kenny since we were in our early 20s, and obviously from a great broadcasting family, and as good as anybody in that family, if not the best of the family, and probably better known for his work with the NFL, particularly in the last 15 or 20 years, the NFL and Fox. But ultimately, I know him personally, and his first love is hockey, and his first love in hockey are the Rangers. So happy for him, because if there's one job that he would want, it would be this one. And I can tell you, I don't want to say this for him, but I could tell you that if he had to give up all of his other broadcasting gigs to cover the Rangers like this, take Sam's spot, he'd do it. Like this is what it's all about for him, and this is the cherry on top of the sundae for him.
Yeah, I actually met him over at the NHL All-Star game in Tampa at Amalie Arena. What a super nice guy. We reconnected, National Sports Media Association. We exchanged books, and then he came on my show, The Motor City Madmouth. You won't ask for a better guy. I have his cell phone number. We exchange text messages every once in a while. If there's anybody who deserves that Rangers gig, any good things he has coming for him, it's Kenny Albert. So God bless Kenny. I love you. Appreciate everything you've done for me. I know you're going to do really, really well with the Rangers, okay? With that said, Mike Whitaker, what do you know about Kenny Albert?
He's definitely one of my favorite announcers. I actually got to speak to him, not this season, but last season when he did a nationally televised game for the Red Wings. Just chatted with him for about 30 seconds, and he was incredibly nice and gracious. I, told him I've always enjoyed his commentating, and I think, like I said, I think he's one of the better ones out there, and it's certainly going to be tough to fill the shoes of a legend like Sam Rosen in New York. But if anybody can do it, I know that Kenny can, and we'll see if maybe he can bring some new luck to the Rangers starting next season, because they definitely need it after the year they had this year.
Okay, Jacob.
When you think of Kenny Albert, you think of him alone in a certain way because it's what you've seen. Maybe it's the differences. Let me tell you this. It does not feel like it's a broadcasting family. You can say what I'm saying with this. Mike. It does. Mike and Mike, yes. I mean, not the most famous ones. But you get the feeling on something like this that it's like you had Al Albert, Kenny Albert, Marv. And I'm like, everything feels so different. Every style feels different. Their personalities feel different. I mean, isn't Marv the oldest one?
Marv is his dad.
His dad. I
Yeah.
kept thinking, because that's what I was thinking. I'm like, they couldn't possibly, because of that thing, because there was such a difference in age. But everybody's personalities are so different. Everything's mine. When you listen to them, you can't tell. If you get certain coaching things with brothers, little brother, big brother, you can see like the Ryans. I'm not saying for announcing, I'm saying for coaching. You can tell. I can't tell anything with the Alberts. And remember, I thought they were all brothers. I didn't even realize it was that wide. So that's just telling you something about this. It's like, just as a family alone, they're all different. And I haven't seen Al Albert in years. But it's a great pickup. Wonderful pickup. It's like he's a wonderful, tremendous announcer when he wants to do anything. He can do, and I personally think you can give him, just like I was talking about with me, I believe you can give him a minute to spare and he'd get it. Just because he is that good.
Fact of the matter, he's one of the nicest people on the planet. He's very down to earth, level headed, and he knows his stuff really well. George, you're in the broadcasting business like I am. Some thoughts about Kenny Albert?
I'm very, very happy for him, Scott. he is a great guy and obviously has been around for a good number of years doing hockey in addition to the other sports. It says here that that his parents gave him a tape recorder for his 5th birthday to practice his broadcasting. That's how far back now. He's 57 now. So for 52 years, this man has had play-by-play and color commentary and interviews and all the other great things he's done. You know, the Olympic Games he's covered. You know, when I think about broadcasters, I think about those that are the most versatile. And certainly he wears that crown very well. I mean, you talk about hockey, but he's also, as we mentioned, done the NFL. He's done Major League Baseball on Fox. He's done the Washington Nationals. You can just go down the line, you know, college bowl games and every other sport. So he's a great guy. I understand. I've never had the opportunity to meet him, but through your interview, Scott, that you did with him, and for things that I know our friend Greg Ennis has told me about Kenny Albert, what a great guy, and so well deserving of that honor to take over for such a legend like Sam Rosen. Yeah.
Okay, Candy and JB.
So I'm going to go as Candy first. So kudos to Kenny. I got to listen and talk to him when you did your broadcast with him, Scott. And actually, I was there when you met him over at in Tampa. He is one of the only sportscasters who currently does play-by-play for all 4 major sports. He did 4 sports in 4 days. On October 25th of 2009, he called play-by-play for the Minnesota Vikings versus the Steelers NFL game for Fox. Then he hosted the New York Yankees locker room celebration after clinching the American League Championship Series that night. The following night, he broadcast a Rangers game on radio, and on October 28th, he called play-by-play for the New York Knicks season opener on MSG Network. So he's the one thing I remember, besides the stories that he told on your show, Scott, was how prepared he is. And to think about, like, for most of us, we're really good in one sport. And here he can do all of them. And he talks very knowledgeable. And yes, I know they have resources now and you can pull up things, but he knows it. Like, I was just very impressed. And yet how down to earth and how he talked about his dad and like the tape recorder and, you know, how he just loves what he does. And that comes through and it shows. So that was the Candy version. Now the JB, great hire, and he knows the area well. Nice to have Albert back at the Garden full time.
There you go. There you have it. Now, I want to send our congratulations to the Western Michigan Broncos as they defeated Boston University in the NCAA championship game, capturing the program's first national title. Somewhere in heaven, former player John Saunders must be celebrating. The Broncos beat Denver that Thursday night, and they finished the season 34-7-1. Mike, you can lead off with this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at all. I know a lot of people don't know a lot about the Western Michigan program. They really turned the corner when Andy Murray went there. He gave them real credibility, and the timing of this national championship is enormous for them because it coincides with them building this new facility on campus. And I saw them play early in the season against Boston College, who was everybody's preseason and probably even regular season pick to win the whole thing. And they played it. It was a 2-1 game, and it was a great game. And so I wasn't surprised at all that they were the team standing at the end. And they did it in great fashion. I mean, they beat a good BU team handily in that final game, 6-2.
Okay, Mike, what's your take on Western Michigan?
I mean, what a tremendous accomplishment it was for them. I know that the Red Wings' own Danny DeKeyser had to be smiling from ear to ear as a former Bronco himself, and I know some people who were down in St. Louis for the game, and they said it was just an incredible atmosphere. it's really great to see not only when a local, well, not really local, but Michigan-based here school have the success, especially for the first time. Just got to tip your hat to them. Like you said, it's definitely not easy to beat a team like Boston College, who a lot of people thought were going to be the last one standing, but good for them. They got it done. And now we got another trophy here in the state of Michigan.
All right, Candy, I'm going to let you go this time because you've had time to prepare for it, but also give us JB's version.
Okay, so for my version, Western Michigan has been competing at the Division I level since 1975. For the first 35 years in Division I, it made the NC2A tournament only 3 times and had never won it all. So congratulations to them for winning it all. Now, JB's, let me see, give me a second. Okay. The NCAA hockey field is made up of almost the same teams, and for Western Michigan to beat a powerhouse is a great accomplishment, and they should be proud of their achievements and celebrate.
All right, go to George Eichhorn.
Yeah, I'm very happy for them. I mean, it's kind of came out of the blue for a lot of Detroit area fans. We're so used to hearing about U of M, especially when the great Red Berenson was their coach. At Michigan State, of course, with Mason and Comley, and they had a great year this year. Wow, Michigan State Spartans. I thought they might go to the finals. But when you mentioned earlier, Mike Santos, about Andy Murray, yeah, people forget that, yeah, he laid that groundwork from 2011 to 2021. And now they obviously 4 years later are reaping the rewards of their hard work. And it's unfortunate because in Detroit, we saw some of the CCHA teams, but we very rarely got a look at Western Michigan at that time. But it's a secret no more. It's a secret no more. They're number one. They're the top team in college hockey. So hats off, of course, to the Broncos on a great achievement.
Well, let alone the fact that they beat 2 historical programs. You beat Denver and then you end up beating Boston University. I mean, those, from what I understand in college hockey, they're as good as it gets. Jacob, some thoughts.
How many times do you hear the same teams in this Frozen Four? You'll hear, you brought up Denver. You brought up Michigan State. You bring up Michigan. You bring up Cornell. You bring up, a BU. You bring up, any of these type of teams. They're the ones you hear all the time. You don't hear Western Michigan. Candy brought it up herself. That they've basically been there 6 times and never even won a game. But how many times do I ever bring up how much of the world's changed in sports? Usually, all of the years that we ever grew up, I'll just talk about any sport, that it's like anybody that just kind of broke through, they lose, they're done. You know what I mean? They're done, and then they have to keep building up and stepping up. Not anymore. Not anymore. I mean, you think of the Golden Knights' first year in existence, getting to the Cup. It's like, it's not. I mean, there's more money, there's more competition in the way, there's all that kind of stuff. Anybody can just slip on in and do whatever. And Western Michigan beaten 2 very, very classic teams. Let me tell you this, and this is not disregarding them at all. Congratulations to them. I am so happy for them. But I will tell you this, in like 2005, it would have been almost unbelievable, enormous, everything, because people didn't step in like that. Now it's pretty normal. They're just in the right timing now. Congratulations to them, and they took advantage. But beating 2 big teams like that is not the same as it was. Like, it would have been enormous 15 years ago. Enormous, just because teams that didn't have a history didn't step in any kind of sport and just do that. They're doing that more now just because it's a different time. But congratulations to them.
Well, I'm going to piggyback off George for a moment, okay? And I don't have to beat you up really seriously, because you are really right. They're no longer the best kept secret in Michigan for sure, because they did what they were able to do. But I'm going to end this topic on this note. I don't even know how much NIL and transfer portal stuff comes into play with this team, but they still managed to come out of nowhere to pull this thing off. And we'll leave it at that. So with that said, we're going to go to one Panthers topic. We go to a station break after that. Congratulations to Florida Panthers head coach Paul Maurice for picking up his 915th win, surpassing Barry Trotz for third on the all-time list. Mike Santos, that's one whale of an accomplishment for Paul Maurice.
Yeah, and kudos to Panthers ownership for making the decision to bring him in. First of all, he actually had quit on the Winnipeg Jets
Right.
the season before they hired him. And it was not he was not well regarded after he did that. You don't find a lot of coaches that quit on a team in the middle of the season. But the Panthers also, when they hired him, came off of a great season, almost full season, with Andrew Burnett as the head coach.
Right.
He took over in November when Quenneville was suspended and was pretty much the head coach for the full year.
Right.
And at that point led them to the best season they had ever had. So it took a lot of guts to not keep Burnett in that position, and also to hire a guy like Maurice, who's had a good track record before he was here, but he's unfiltered, and it was a little bit of a risk for them to make that move, and it's paid off, and kudos to him. Obviously, it's paid off with 2 straight finals appearances, a Stanley Cup last year, and boy, they're off to a good start after last night too.
Yeah, I'm going to say this about that hire. Number one, Andrew Burnett came off a heck of a year. He really did. And I did feel, and I had spoken to George Richards, and with George, who obviously covers the Panthers extensively, but he felt they needed a veteran coach, and that's why they opted to go with Paul Maurice. But Andrew Burnett did end up doing an admirable job with Florida, and he ended up taking a Nashville job. Obviously, he has a lot of work to do out there, and we'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But Paul Maurice turned out to be one big home run hire for Florida, and we're going to talk about the Florida Panthers Tampa Bay Lightning series later in the show. We're not going to get any more series outside of that one. I want to see how the rest of them play out before we go any deeper. We just feel like we have a lot of other topics that are far more important than going into what I consider incomplete series. So more power to the Panthers. They brought in Paul Maurice, and the guy has done an outstanding job. I think he felt like in Winnipeg he had done everything that he could do with a small market team, and he's been given all the resources, let alone having Bill Zito as your general manager, who I consider nothing less of a genius for being able to bring in these guys, and look what's happening. So we'll talk a bit more about the Panthers and Lightning later in the show, but I will not get into any other series until next Wednesday night's edition of the Sports Exchange. Okay, with that said, Mike, what are your thoughts about Paul Maurice?
Well, he's shown himself to be one of the better coaches in the NHL. It was kind of strange, kind of like you mentioned, when he literally stepped away from the Jets in the middle of their season. Can understand why some Jets fans would not be too pleased about that, but obviously he has a good team of players, not only to oversee, but he's been able to lead them to the Cup final 2 years in a row. Culminated with the first ever championship for the Panthers last year, and so far they're off to a pretty good start this year with that pretty convincing takedown of the Lightning in their game 1 the other night. And so we'll see that if he can lead them to a three-peat appearance in the final and maybe 2 titles in 3 years.
Hey, Joshua, you ever heard of the word patience? I'll give you some good advice. It works. We have more hockey to get to, just so you understand. So hang in there with us. Keep in mind, this is a national hockey show, and I do my best to get as much Florida stuff in there as I can, but I have an entire NHL to get to. With that said, George, go ahead.
Well, Paul Maurice obviously has had a successful career. Yes, it's had his ups and downs, but going back to when he started in Detroit and Windsor, it's interesting that, to be honest with you, it's interesting that the Red Wings, I don't know if they ever tried to get him, but he would have been probably a decent fit because, like I said, he He not only played for the Windsor Spitfires, but then he coached them. He coached the Detroit Junior Red Wings, but that was all in the past. And now is now. And to be a coach and win your first Stanley Cup is remarkable. And for the franchises first, I mean. And really, it was an amazing season. And they're continuing it, like you guys said, this year as well. So hats off to Paul Maurice. He's put in a lot of years in the NHL, the KHL, the AHL, and the OHL. And certainly deserves his tip of the hat from here in the Motor City as well.
I don't think there's any question Paul Maurice is going to get a statue out in front of a Merit Bank Arena if he wins another one. Holy moly. We know his name is going into the Raptors to begin with. All right, Jacob, go ahead.
You have to ask what happened with Winnipeg, just as far as his mind. Where was his mind when they did that? Winnipeg's not happy. Don't get that wrong. They have every right to, as much as I get on fans of every sport ever, they have every right on that. You kind of just bailed on them. But we do have to ask how much he's been an NHL coach since 95.
Right.
That's 30 years. How many times has he been to playoffs? And you know how stressful the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Stanley Cup playoffs are stressful to us as fans. Insane. How much would it be as coach? And how many games? How many Stanley Cup games? You have to wonder and ask. And mind you, we don't have his answer, and he's not going to really tell the media every little detail unless he writes a book. However, he's written a book already. You have to ask the question, did he just have to mentally decompress? You know, just from the thing. Remember, he was 27 years in when he quit. You just have to wonder if, I mean, remember, he retired. He just basically bailed out at 13-10. He bailed out at 13-10. So ask yourself, I mean, was there pressure? Were there people getting on him? Did he just do it? Did he just need a decompress because remember, he coached like 40 games the next year. So he had to go through how many? No, I'm sorry. My apologies. He was all 82. But you have to ask how much was it mental decompression? How much was it pressure?
Yeah, truthfully, I don't think he was going to come back and coach until the Panthers situation came about. When he saw that opportunity with the talent they had, he had no choice but to take it. All right, Candy, you can speak for yourself and JB. And then after that, we go to a station break, a lot more hockey to talk about tonight. And let's not forget our pundit moment as well. That'll come as we go along as well. This is a fun moment. It's going to be a really neat one. So, hey, stay with us. All right, Candy.
Paul Maurice is a Canadian professional ice hockey coach and a former player. At age 43, Maurice became the youngest coach in NHL history to coach 1,000 games, reaching the milestone on November 28, 2010. He also holds a record for the most losses by an NHL coach with 736. But the success that he's brought and that he's had at the Panthers has changed the mindset of the Panthers here. And he's bringing fans back to the stands. They're drawing better crowds. Florida is, I will say, for lack of a better word, a fair-weathered team, fair-weathered fans. They support their team when they're winning, but when they're not,
the Rats come out, and that's against the home team.
Yeah, right.
But kudos to him for getting this opportunity and for it all gelling together and working together. Because let's face it, in hockey, to maintain that high level and being up on top is very hard to do. You know, that Detroit had their streak where they made the playoffs for how many years, but now they've missed for how many years. That tells you how hard it is. It's not easy to do that. So kudos to them. They're in a tough series right now with the Lightning, but hopefully they can pull it off.
As for JB.
Oh, yep. As for JB, it says a lot to move up on an all-time wins list. You have to be good at what you do in order to have that chance. You also have to have a great organization behind you that supplies you the talent and believes in your vision on the ice. It says a lot to get there, and there is more in his future as they are playing tough against the Lightning in the first round.
Okay, fair enough. All right, you go to a station break. A lot more stuff to get to.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, tuning into the enduring wisdom of visionary leaders. It is written by our host, Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth, and the foreword is written by another panelist, Mr. George Eichhorn. The book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. Get your copy today. It talks about how the media has changed over Scott's 40-plus years in the industry. There is also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where there's a link to our merchandise store as well as a plethora of great content. Go check it out. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. If you want to sponsor a show, call Scott 954-304-4941. And if you want to be a guest on a show or have show ideas, you can always email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Back to you, Scott.
All right. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. If the ratings take a hit in the National Hockey League, I'll give you a lot of good reasons why. For the first time in NHL history, the 4 U.S.-based teams, the original 6, have all missed the Stanley Cup playoffs. The first time in the history, believe it or not, that 4 American U.S.-based teams. We talk about the Rangers, the Bruins, Chicago Blackhawks, Detroit Red Wings, and another first also, if you have the Bruins, the Rangers, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's a lot of big American markets out there, Mike Santos, that are, can you believe that? This is unbelievable.
Yeah, I can. In this age of the NHL, there's so much parity, and it doesn't take but a bad move or two, a bad draft or two, and you can fall right out of the top 16 in this league. And that's what's happened with all these organizations that you mentioned. Boston, I listened to their press conference today with Cam Neely and Don Sweeney, and they're a mess. They're a mess. They had an interim coach, Joe Sacco, who they still don't know what they're going to do with. And that's after firing 2 coaches who had tremendous success with them. The first one, Cassidy, then went on to win the Stanley Cup the very next year with Vegas, and then Jim Montgomery, who had the best record in the NHL and the best record all time in the NHL a couple of years ago, gets dismissed in the middle of this season, moves on to St. Louis, and brings St. Louis back from the dead into the playoffs. So that's just one example. The Red Wings, the Rangers, the Blackhawks, they all have their own issues, right? But yeah, it's different, and it's a big league now. Money means so much. How you spend it means so much. There's just, I think it was Jacob was brought up Vegas. First year they go to the finals. Third year they win the cup. Right, that would never happen with an expansion team before. The rules have changed. The way the way teams play the game has changed. The way they travel has changed, and we've gone through years where, 1 or no Canadian teams have made the playoffs, which is crazy. And there's 7 of them, so 4 of the 6 U.S. 4 of the 6 teams who happen to be 4 of the 6 original teams who happen to be from the U.S. missing doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but they're major TV markets, and that's where ESPN and TNT and ABC have to be salivating. But I agree with you 100%. I really do.
But that's on the NHL, okay?
No, I get that. I'm just saying.
Because the NHL had a decade with teams like, they had a Stanley Cup final. It was with the Rangers in LA in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, what markets in the U.S. are bigger than that for TV? And what did they do to capitalize on that? Nothing.
Right.
They had the Chicago Blackhawks, who were in 3 finals, in 10 years. Another major market, original 16. They did nothing to capitalize that. I mean, there was a decade of original 6 teams in the finals between the Blackhawks, the Boston Bruins, who were in the finals twice, the Rangers, who we just mentioned, right? I mean, the Red Wings, of course, with their run. I mean, they had original 6 teams and major markets in playoffs for years, and they didn't do anything with it. And the game has changed. It's you can talk about major TV markets, but the game is now played all over this country. It's not a sport just for the Northeast anymore. And teams have been in Dallas and in Southern California for years now. Not 10 years, not 15 years, 25, 30 years. So it's changed. The NHL's changed. The landscape's changed. And if they're not taking advantage of, when they have the opportunity to have some of these major television markets in there, then sorry, that's their fault.
No, I agree with you. Everything you're saying is on point. Bottom line is when you lose 4 major markets of these nature, the reality is the numbers are going to suffer. But everything you said is on point. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm agreeing. And then you add Pittsburgh to the fray, and then you look at some of the star power out there like Sidney Crosby. That all adds up. But that's not taking away from all the other teams that played their way and earned their way in there that rightfully deserve the opportunity. And there's still some major markets left. Let's turn over to Jacob. What are your thoughts?
Let me tell you this. You brought up the major TV markets. Here's an issue with something like that. It's not what it used to be because we're not, you don't look at New York, Chicago, or anything like that. Let me bring a little deal to you. I can go to ESPN Plus. I watch, say, St. Louis versus Las Vegas, hypothetical. I'm just giving, this is in the regular season. It said, I go to ESPN Plus, I click that game. It says the Blues announcers or the Vegas announcers. Guess what I pick? I'm a Blues fan. But I say, but I can also pick from either side. Do you want Spanish or do you want English? So many different options, and I'll bet you there'll be French eventually because there's French Canadian. So many different options now. The big TV markets aren't going to be there because it's all streaming now. Everything is streaming. So, I'm from Quincy, Illinois, small town, 2 hours outside of St. Louis, and I can watch late night Vegas. Same thing. It'd be the same rating. So it really wouldn't matter. But here's the deal with this, and I'm going to bring something else up. I brought up Detroit earlier. I brought up how irritated I was with the fans with their wanting to tank, and then they still can't get back now because they're stupid. The Blackhawks were the same. 3 Stanley Cups, and all they could do is whine and cry about Stan Bowman, who is from hockey royalty.
Right.
All they could do is complain about him. They won out. It's like now they are in the worst. Then they get Jeremy Colleton. They wanted their guy out, then they get Jeremy Colleton, who's horrible, and then they complain about him. Well, they wanted him. Just seriously, it's no different from Grifal. I'm just going to say this. The White Sox, after La Russa was going, same. They all complain, they all celebrate, then they pretend they never did. It's like these front offices of any type of sports team, we'll say hockey right now, we'll say to any of them, quit listening to fans. Quit giving them the time of day. You don't know anything. They don't know anything. It's like, I really believe if you didn't make some of these moves to try to quiet things down, you're probably in the playoffs a lot quicker than you are now. The whole thing with Detroit, Chicago, New York, all of this, it's on them for their deals, but it's not really going to matter with the market. But we got to get to a point where we just quit. The people that go to these games, they're there to gamble. They're there to drink. They're there to yell. They're not in that. They're not in those draft rooms, and they're not in the offices. Quit trying to appease them. Ignore the noise and build a team again.
Yeah, let me that.
Go ahead.
It wasn't all that long ago when 16 of 21 NHL teams used to make the playoffs.
That's true.
True.
Now we've got 32 teams.
Yeah.
So the odds of making the playoffs aren't quite as great as they used to be. And all of us graybeards here who, yearned for the years when we were young and, the Red Wings and the Bruins and the Canadians and the Maple Leafs and the Rangers and the Blackhawks were always in there fighting for the cup every year. The game's changed. As I said, the markets have changed. And there are fans in Vegas and San Jose and Anaheim and Dallas and all these places. They're not they're not just in the places where we're from anymore.
That's an excellent point.
Mhm.
16 out of 21 for all those guys collecting AARP, of which Mike Whitaker is not one of them. All right, so Mike, what are your thoughts about what I just talked about? 4 U.S. original 6 teams not making it.
Well, obviously, some some of those teams are going in different directions. Obviously, you have the Red Wings, who, I cover intimately here. They certainly had a long run of success, and I think they are kind of paying the price for that success of having never had the first overall draft pick all those years. Obviously, there were numerous missteps with Ken Holland in his later years as the general manager. And, I think, obviously what Steve Yzerman is doing, he certainly has his work cut out for him because the situation he inherited truly was pretty rotten. But, obviously there is some impatience growing around here, and I know that George can certainly see it too with fans who feel that maybe this team should be progressing quicker than they are. But then again, you talk about some of the other original 6 teams who are not in the playoffs. I don't think anybody expected Boston to completely implode on itself the way that they did. I mean, this is a team that's only 2 years removed from 65 wins. They sold at the trade deadline. Obviously, they are going to be probably on the verge of a painful rebuild. And then you have teams like the Blackhawks who have been near the bottom of the NHL now for the last couple of years. They're obviously hoping that, Connor Bedard can help to kind of lead them out of that darkness, but he can't do it all himself. Obviously, he needs help. And then the New York Rangers, that's just kind of a mess of a situation, especially with how things went for them this season. They started out tremendously well and looked like they were going to cruise to another playoff spot, and then things just completely fell apart. And so obviously a lot of Rangers fans are not happy today with the news that Chris Drury was re-signed as general manager for multiple years. That's a situation I would not want to be overseeing right now because, kind of like you all alluded to, it really is a mess right now.
Should have signed up for longer if his fans are complaining about it. Fans don't know anything. Just sign up for longer.
To add to that, again, we kind of hit a nerve with this one, Scott. But again, the league is so much bigger than it used to be, and so
Right.
when you're on top for as long as those teams were on top. I mean, again, go back to the decade from 2010 to 2020. Boston, Chicago, Detroit. You want to throw in Pittsburgh in there, the Rangers. They were all on top. And you know what happens when you're on top in a 32-team league? You draft 32nd. That's a lot different than drafting 20th in a 20-team league or a 21-team league. And so that's the way it's set up. And it's set up that way for a reason. Whether it's the new expansion draft rules or the fact that when you win, you draft last. And so that's why you get into these situations. You try to keep yourself, and Jacob's right. The fans, they have no clue what's really going on here. But they sure were happy in Chicago when they were, they were on the brink of winning the cup for 10 years in a row. That was fine. But then all of a sudden, and what it took to manage that team with a salary cap, who do you keep, who do you let go, and manage that team so that they could win 3 cups in those 10 years. Like that's hard. But when you hit bottom now, you hit bottom because it's just 10 years in a row of managing a salary cap, trying to keep your team as competitive as it can be to win while you're in that window, and drafting last. So you're not really getting any of those top prospects coming in your organization to refill the cupboards. It's hard.
Oh, absolutely. Mike, you nailed it. So many levels. Something else about the Boston Bruins, you just, like you said earlier, Mike, you don't let a guy like Jim Montgomery and Bruce Cassidy get away because you were headed for a much quicker rebuild because you let 2 elite coaches go. That's what it is. And I agree with you totally. So let's turn it over to George.
Well, lots of different things going on here in this discussion, but I'll try to net mine out. The networks are not turning a deaf ear to these teams, as we know. NBC, ABC, I mean, and TNT. You get their schedules out that come out way in advance, and you see how many games involving Pittsburgh, Detroit, New York, Boston are on that schedule. So the networks themselves are not ignoring the teams, but the fact of the matter is that, like you said, Mike, these teams, there's so many teams now in hockey, they are stepping right over. They don't have a sense of being afraid to play in Detroit or being afraid to go to the new Boston Garden and playing. I mean, these guys now, they're strapping up and they're great players all around the league. There is a certain part of Scott and myself and others that relish, Jacob probably too, the original six. But the rest of the hockey world, a lot of people don't give a darn about the original six. They just care about, obviously, I like Vegas. I'm going to support Columbus. I'm going to put my fun into the Florida Panthers. So it's spread out all over. So I think the fact that your original six does not carry as much weight, obviously, as it used to, because we have so many more teams now. And that makes it even harder for the Eisermans and the Kenny Hollands and the Bowmans of the world to try to turn these franchises around, or in some cases try to keep them up, like the Rangers and the Bruins have been more successful lately, obviously, than Detroit and Chicago. But there's so much competition out there. There's so many games. I think the networks still long for it because, as Scott and I have talked about this on other shows, you get that schedule published and there you go. They'll do a Red Wings game. They'll do a Bruins game, and they'll get good ratings for those. They will. But it's a tough playing. The ice surface is just shared by so many different entities and so many different teams that it makes it harder and harder for the original six to make it.
Yeah, and I'll take that one step further, George. In 1993, when Gary Bettman became commissioner of the NHL, one of the things that he changed, or that was changed, and it was done for broadcasting reasons, is they made all the ice surfaces in the NHL the same size. Prior to then, teams had different size ice surfaces, different arenas. They also used to, in many arenas, they also would have the home bench next to the penalty benches. So that was an advantage when you had a guy coming out of the penalty box who was closer to your bench. All that was changed for broadcasting, so that broadcast could broadcast the game the same way in every arena, and two, to make that things fair and equitable. The problem with that, and you alluded to it, George, is they took away what was thought of as the home ice advantage. And now you cannot build your team specifically for your ice surface. So back in the day, there were places like Boston, for instance, that had a small ice surface, and they always had big, tough teams. But when you went to Montreal with a bigger, faster ice surface, you better be ready to skate. That doesn't exist in the NHL. Every night you're playing in a 200 by 85 rink with the same size glass and the same size boards, and Jacob will like this, and the fans have no influence on these players because the fans are more interested in what's going on with the dot race on the scoreboard. They're not reaching over the bench like they used to do with the Spectrum in Philly or the Forum in Montreal and grabbing a handful of some guy's mullet on the bench or spitting on him or anything else. These guys, if you took an NHL team, and I know this from experience, and you blindfolded them, they wouldn't know what arena they were in until the other team came up because they're all the same. There's no more home ice advantage, and there's no way that you can build your team for your home ice or to play a certain style because you've got to play all the same style. Before you could play a certain style at home, you would have to be ready for your 41 games on the road, but you had a big advantage for your 41 games at home. No more. Everything's the same now.
Excellent points all the way around. I didn't know that. I learned every time you come out, Mike, I always learn an awful lot. All right, we'll turn over to Candy/JB. We have a lot more good NHL information, and then we'll We'll talk about one series that's in particular interest for a lot of people in these parts. It'll be the Panthers and the Lightning, but we have a few more things we want to get to. All right, Candy, go ahead.
So,
Let's keep it rolling.
so one of the things I'm going to put my hat on first, and I'm going to talk about. So there are more teams in the NHL. So there are more. So if you're taking your top talent, because let's face it, normally in most drafts, your talent is not going to be really, really deep. And even if it is, maybe each team gets one really good player, but then you're not getting two or three really good players. You have to hit on everything because there's so many other teams in the league. You have to hit on your head coaching. You have to hit on your drafts. You have to hit on your GM. The other thing that we haven't discussed is you have to stay healthy because big injuries play a role in hockey too. Because if a player goes down for any significant amount of time and you're without one of your key players, that affects the rest of the team and all the different lines and who's gelling with who and who's not. And maybe it's your goalie goes down and your goalie was significant. So I think we forget about all of that. And I think especially in all of sports, everybody is so quick to, I need results now. And if I don't get the results I want now, I'm going to make some kind of change. And we got to keep changing instead of maybe sticking with people 2 or 3 seasons to see if it will gel and work. I think a lot of teams are quick to do that as well. Now I'm going to put my JB hat on. The NHL is a new and exciting time. The original 6 are not the powers that they used to be. There are opportunities for expansion teams, aka Vegas, and other exciting teams to make waves and create dynasties. It is based off the TV deals and the salary caps. Or is it bad hires and upper management is the question. Either way, the NHL playoffs are the best playoffs in sports.
Now, the only thing I'm going to add to close out the topic is this. When the Red Wings were losing, they had bad luck in the lottery anyways. They couldn't even land the number 1 pick, alone 2. So there's, as far as I'm concerned, you don't need to tank. I don't know if they were tanking, but they were bad, and they still never got the number 1 or 2 pick in the draft. So I'll leave it at that. A few other things I want to get to. Connor Hellebuyuk becomes the 7th goalie in NHL history to record 45 wins in a single season. We can go a little bit rapid on some of these thoughts. So, Mike, what are your thoughts about Connor Hellebuyuk?
Great goalie. Probably on a mission this year after his disappointing first round last year against Colorado. They were a favorite in the West last year, and they got bounced early, and he was not very good. I mean, I think that game 1 he gave up 7 or 8. So kudos to him for having a bounce back season. Also for wanting to play in Winnipeg and for re-signing there. A lot of guys, especially his caliber and a goaltender, would take the money to get the heck out of there. But he committed himself long-term there to be the guy. He's on a mission this year. Had a great season, and I would make them my favorite right now in the NHL. And nobody wants to say that, but look at what they did in the regular season. I don't know why they're not the favorite to win the whole thing.
Good points. All right, Mike.
Obviously, Connor Hellebuyuk is arguably the best goalie in the league, I would say. Obviously, he has a lot of local connections, being a Michigan native and having gone to high school locally here, which is great to see Michigan pumping out so many great hockey talents. But I think that as Connor Hellebuyuk goes, so go the Winnipeg Jets, essentially. Obviously, they have a lot of great players up front, but you're not going to get it done without good goaltending. He's been their rock all season. He would be my pick for the Vezina Trophy as the league's best goalie this year again. And we'll see how far he can take them. Maybe it's the Jets who can finally end the long Canadian Stanley Cup drought.
Jacob?
When you win 45 games and then you have the memory of a first-round bounce, the biggest thing is you don't want a reputation, and I'm going to say this for front offices. Remember, all of these leagues, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, hockey, any of it, there's going to be a fraternity. There's going to be a thought process. You don't want the idea of being the regular season guy. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to be, okay, he's so good there, then will he bomb? Will he bomb when it counts? He's going to need these type of, and in truth, being Winnipeg, they got 2-0 on St. Louis. They probably need to sweep them.
Right.
In truth, to really keep that thing. I mean, you said it yourself, Mike, coming in on a mission. They kind of really need to be a mission. They really don't need a battle from an 8 seed from a team that's done this before in 19. Came all the dang way back. They don't need a battle. They need to get rid of them quick.
George?
Yeah, Connor is a great goaltender. Obviously, he's first in this season with 47 wins. He's first with the goals against of 2.01, and he's second in save percentage at 92%, and first in shutouts with 8. So there's no question about it. 31 years old, and you're right, Mike, Commerce Township, which is the home of our friends Jim Brandstatter and Robbie. It's great to see Connor do this. And I agree with you, Santos. I did pick Winnipeg. I know there was one show, it was either a week or two ago, that Scott was asking us who we might think in the playoffs have an extended run or end up in the finals. On paper, Winnipeg should do it. But there's that old thing that still bothers so many people. It's called the President's Trophy jinx.
Right.
And obviously, Winnipeg won the President's Trophy. I think that's the first time in history. I'm sure it is. But hey, with Connor at the helm, I agree. They should be. They should be all the way to the finals. But hey, we know it's the toughest postseason in all of sports.
Okay, Candy, what hat are you wearing first?
I'm going to wear JB's hat. 45 wins by a goalie is a great achievement, especially in today's NHL where goalies don't usually play back-to-back games and the talent level is so much faster and quicker. He had hell of a season, and now if he can stay hot, who knows where his team can end up. NHL playoffs are all about hot goalies at the right time.
No question about it. All right, what's your take, Candy?
I'm going to say the same. Like, anytime you have excel and win as many as he did from a goalie that's young goalie, kudos to him. Like, that's awesome. And hopefully or not hopefully, depending on what team you're rooting for, whether you want to see him have continued success in the playoffs.
The only thing I'll say about this whole thing is this. And I know a lot of people might like to see this matchup if it ever plays out. How many people wouldn't want to see Winnipeg take on Florida, Paul Maurice's old team? Many thought there was a chance of it last year. I tell you, if you thought the ticket prices were high for Edmonton and you had Connor McDavid, I think one thing that would happen with Paul Maurice is he's going to have a lot of heartburn over this, facing a team that he decided to leave. But he says, if the Panthers don't win it, I want to see the Winnipeg Jets win it. You never know. You just never know. I'm just simply throwing it out there. All right, since we're talking the NHL, we're doing a lot of hockey tonight. I'm just going to mention some more FYIs, and people can comment on them if they want. And we do have a pundit segment buried into this whole hockey show. Connor McDavid becomes the 4th active player in NHL history to achieve 8 career 100-point seasons. He joins the likes of Marcel Dion with 8, Mario Lemieux with 10, and Wayne Gretzky with 15. We don't need long answers for this one. But, Mike, what are your thoughts about what Connor McDavid just did?
Well, he's far and away right now the best player of this generation. And I include Ovechkin and Crosby in the previous generation. But I don't think there's anybody that can touch him. I mean, Matthews, obviously, he's on a pace to score a ton of goals in this league, but I don't think he's the dynamic player that McDavid is. I don't think he's the exciting player that McDavid is. Sadly, for the NHL that we've been talking about tonight, which has lots of great markets now in places like Vegas and Southern California and Texas and Florida, he's stuck up there in Edmonton. And so most of the country, especially on the eastern seaboard here, gets to see him play one time a year in their market. And so it's too bad. I don't think a lot of people really know as much about him. And it's too bad.
All right, Mike Whitaker.
Actually, apologize, guys. Just bear with me 1 second here. I seem to be having an issue with my.
All right, well, we'll come back to you. Go to George Eichhorn.
Yeah, Scott. I agree with what Mike Santos said. I mean, here's a guy one of your premier players in your league, and he's playing for a team in the middle of Canada. Now, of course, we saw with Wayne Gretzky, and we saw how great the Edmonton Oilers achieved success with Messier and Gretzky and all the other ones. But this is a little bit different. This is a guy who is undoubtedly one of the top tier players in the league. My gosh, 64 goals just a couple of years ago, and 361 goals in his career already in 712 games played. Connor McDavid is a matinee idol. He should be focus of a lot of teams, but the thing is, just like you said, Mike, is that you see him once a year. You're going to come to Madison Square Garden once. You're going to go to Detroit once. You're going to play at the Forum once. So it is difficult to be a star in this league now, especially when you're with a team that is not at one of the market cities, the premier cities, if you will.
What would have happened had Gretzky not been traded to LA?
Yeah, good question.
That trade is given a lot of credit for the expansion of the league into what they call the Sun Belt markets. And people have to realize that Gretzky played more than the second half of his career in the United States, in LA, but obviously also in New York, in St. Louis.
Yep.
So that added a lot to the league, obviously, but it added a lot to his legacy as well. Because once that happened, and he had all the Stanley Cups behind him at that point in time, right? I mean, he won all the Stanley Cups up in Edmonton. But it was the second half of his career that everybody in the U.S. really got a chance to see him. And that's probably what he did the most good for the sport and the league, was his second half of his career.
Well, I mean, I'll say this much. The one thing the NHL has going for it, the NBA doesn't, you don't ever worry about load management in the NHL. These guys play through practically everything, and the NBA doesn't play through anything. So you don't have to worry about load management in the NHL. These are the most fierce athletes I've ever seen that really work as hard as they can and get paid less than these other guys in the league. So I just hope that Connor McDavid does win a Stanley Cup championship at some point. All right, back to Mike Whitaker. Then we go to Jacob, and then we go to the Candy JB combination.
Well, I think we saw McDavid's greatness on display there the other night against the Los Angeles Kings, with his pretty much single-handedly taking over the third period for the Oilers. Unfortunately, that game did not end well for them, and obviously Edmonton fans are extremely upset with their goaltending today. But McDavid just continues to be just completely on another level. We can see how much he cares about winning, especially after his tears in the locker room after losing Game 7 to the Panthers. I think that really sticks with a lot of Oilers fans. They can see his devotion to his craft, and he truly is on another level. And it would be cool for the game to see him win the Stanley Cup at some point. But I mean, I guess we could open Pandora's box and wonder whether or not it's going to be with the Oilers, though.
I'll find out. All right, Jacob.
If you'd never watched one single solitary hockey game ever, and your first game, and I've watched thousands, and I've done all that kind of stuff, but I'm just saying if a person hasn't, and they watched that tournament, the USA-Canada final, and they watched all that, first thing they would see, if you look at that, is Connor McDavid flying down the middle of the ice, realizing that's a star right there. Out of everybody that we see, it was a wonderful game, but you just take one look at it. you can just tell things when someone's a star. You get my point? You can just tell their movement, their aura, their confidence. Connor McDavid has it and more, and you brought it up yourself, George. 364 career goals already. That's ridiculous. I mean, we were thinking without a shadow of a doubt, no one's catching Wayne, and no one's going to catch his points, regardless. But Ovi catches Wayne's goals, and the way that McDavid's going, Wayne's will be third. The way that that's going, but the biggest thing is, as far as Willie winning with Edmonton and everything like that, this isn't Peter Pocklington anymore. This isn't that kind of deal by itself. It's like more than just that team has their kind of issues whatsoever by itself. It's such a changed league. We've watched 30 for 30 and what happened with Wayne. You know what I'm saying? We've seen it. We know the whole story by now. Just a touch of different time. I think he wins it, but it's like, is it with Edmonton? 50-50.
Interesting point. Mike, having some problems with the camera? Let's get it figured out.
Actually,
okay?
just had to
Okay.
stick a cord in there.
I just want to make sure that everything's cool on your end. All right, let's go to Candy and JB.
Okay, so as for me, I think since I'm not as big of a hockey fan as some others on this panel, especially, knowing that people are putting him and talking about him in the same sentence as Wayne Gretzky tells you what kind of a player he is. Because Wayne is known for everybody. Anybody that knows anything about sports knows Wayne Gretzky's name is synonymous with hockey. And so to be putting Connor McDavid's name in the same sentence means he's a great player. Means he's been very off. He's had a dominance on the offensive side. I did watch some of the finals last year and saw, and I've seen some of his games. He is a great player, and he's good for hockey because he's so good, because he seems like an all around good player. He's good for what's good in hockey. Now, as far as JB's comments, is there any question he is the best on the ice at the moment? Would love to see him play for the Stanley Cup and get the ratings up. Think he is what the NHL needs to draw in eyes and become more relevant.
Okay. All right, we've got a list here. Most goals all time, including the playoffs, top 10. I want each and every one of you to size up this list. Okay, we'll start off with Mike. Wayne Gretzky has 1,016 goals. Alex Ovechkin, 966 and counting. Gordie Howe, 869. Brett Hull, 844, along with Jaromir Jagr, same number, 844. Mark Messier, 803. Phil Esposito, Candy, put that picture up there. I'm proud of this one. 778. There's a good picture when I was up there recently of me in front of his statue in Emily. What a nice statue to be in front of, Phil. Mario Lemieux, 766. Steve Yzerman, 762, and Marcel Dion, 752. Basically enough, all of Dion's points were with the LA Kings, so he never made it to the postseason with the Red Wings. All right, Mike, size up this list. What do you think about this group?
I mean, obviously, elite performers and elite playoff performers, but I think there's a difference between, say, Brett Hull and Alex Ovechkin, who scored goals, and Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux that did so much more in the playoffs than just score goals. And you can go down the list, right? I mean, I'd put Yzerman on the side with Gretzky and Lemieux, right? Esposito, not as a better complete player than most people gave him credit for, but still known as the guy that's going to put the puck in the net. So, I mean, that's how I size up the list. There's guys on that list that there's no doubt they could score goals, but there's also guys on the list that did so much more during the playoffs than just score goals.
Sounds good. All right, Mike, how do you size up the list?
It's obviously very, very difficult to, when you talk about the intangibles of certain players that you were just discussing there. Obviously, a player like Alex Ovechkin is going to be known for his goal scoring, whereas a player like Wayne Gretzky played an all-around game. Obviously, his amount of assists alone would put him in first place in NHL history just for points. And so maybe some of these players are regarded as a bit more one-dimensional, but what Ovechkin was able to accomplish this season by tying Gretzky in goals, I don't think anybody ever thought at the time that record would be broken. Then you have a guy like you mentioned, Jaromir Jagr, who not only consistently scored, but his longevity was just legendary. I believe he's even still playing at the age of 50 or however old he is in his native homeland right now. Obviously, you have the greats that people around here that where George and I are greatly familiar with, obviously like Steve Yzerman, like Gordie Howe. Marcel Dion did play in Detroit, albeit briefly, but went on to enjoy more of a more notable career with the Los Angeles Kings. But yeah, just every player on that list that you gave is great in their own way. Some excelled at different things better than others, but it's really hard to stack up greatness more than those names there.
We'll turn it over to George.
Well,
great segue, Mike. Good job,
yeah,
man.
yeah. Well, obviously in Detroit, yeah. Gordie Howe, I think you said Scott is number 3 on the list. And the thing that strikes a lot of us about Gordie is obviously Gordie was not afraid to muck it up and give you an elbow, getting a Gordie Howe penalty. I mean, a hat trick as they label it. I think of him as more of a complete. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from Gretzky and Ovechkin. They're great goal scorers and all that. But I mean, you talk about a guy who toughed it out, and that was Gordie Howe. But then again, all the other great players that you mentioned is just phenomenal. I mean, it's like this. Okay, you could do well in your career, and you can have great regular seasons. But what you are remembered for most by the diehard fans, I believe, how many titles did your team win, or how many finals games you played and championships you brought to our team. So, I mean, you could keep racking up statistics and goals and all that. Ovechkin's only got 1 cup so far, and they got a good chance this year. But let's see if he can do it in his Washington team. But I always look at it, how did it fit into the master plan of the team, the franchise he's playing for, and going to the finals.
Jacob?
You brought up Gretzky to St. Louis. I thought they had it. After all of those times of watching Detroit take them out, all those times, and then what happens? Gretzky gives up the turnover and double overtime. Bang! Pretty much after the clink off the top of the post. I still remember that clink. I was listening to it on the radio. It's crazy. And then Gretzky does that. But really, overall, you brought up another one. It was one of my favorites, Brett Hull. Never hear him anymore. I never hear that name anymore. And that was one of my favorites ever. It's like 844 goals. And you just think about that for a second. But again, goal scorer, slap shot guy, just like with Al McGinnis.
Right.
You have all of those. But here's the thing with these points, with the way they're going, and it's such a different game now. And Ovi started something. How much longer before some of these other guys do it? And then the future draft picks do it. How much longer do these records have? I thought that these were going forever. I think Wayne's is it. 2850, I believe. 2879 or something like that. I believe that stays just because he did it all. But how much longer do the goal scoring, all that stuff, any of the individual things, how long does that have? And I would have thought it would have been forever.
Katie?
I'm going to put the JB hat on first. The talent on this list is top rate. Either way, Gretzky is the best to lace the skates, followed by Howe and Hull. But that doesn't ever take away from Ovechkin's greatness. To even be included with those names shows that you are a great player. What I'm going to say is there's lists for everything. You can list whatever. You can list and a list always has have a cutoff point. When you're talking about greatness of players, you're being subjective because obviously you can't. Yes, a lot of times you qualify. A lot of people will qualify by, did you win champions? Were you MVP? Did you, like for football, is how many Super Bowl trophies do you have? For a quarterback, that determines if you're, elite. But I think those named on that list are very talented players. But again, I think Gretzky, I think some of them stand above, and I think there's a little bit of a drop off in that list.
Okay, I'll give you a summary of every player where what I think I know in my mind is correct. Wayne Gretzky was smart. Took number 99. Why? Didn't want to wear 9 for Gordie Howe. I guess part of the thing is I'm surprised he played for as many franchises as he did. Alex Ovechkin has a goal scoring record that will never be broken. Gordie Howe, what can I say? Mr. Hockey owns the name. No matter how many of his records are broken, Mr. Hockey is what it is, and Mr. Hockey will be known for his longevity as well as his goal scoring prowess, I should say. Brett Hall, can't believe this, but somebody's actually better than Bobby Hall, and it's Brett Hall. Jaromir Jagr, another one of those guys that's played into his 50s and as durable as you can believe. And his career, played with Florida, played with Pittsburgh, he's played everywhere. I'm just amazed that he's had the dedication to the sport that he's had. Mark Messier, what's he known for? The Cups in Edmonton? No. How about the one he won with the New York Rangers and broke that major drought in New York? Phil Esposito scored 76 goals back in the 70s. That's unbelievable. We talk about the goals that were being scored these days. Let's not forget that. Mario Lemieux, without Mario Lemieux, there would be no Pittsburgh Penguins, period. They were bankrupt and they were ready to go. And Mario Lemieux not only amassed 766 goals, but saves the franchise. Steve Yzerman, we'll see if he can get this rebuild figured out. But on the ice, he was unbelievable. It was good for 3 Stanley Cups and was a major factor with Tampa Bay Lightning turning into what they are. Marcel Dion, the reason why that they have that thing to protect the players at Olympia Stadium was because of Marcel Dion. The guy still, to me, is one of those players that put Southern California on the map by playing with the LA Kings. That's what I think of them all. There's a top 10 list, and I think that all the reasons they stated for him, they all deserve kudos in a lot of different ways. So with that, we have one more topic I want to get to hockey-wise, and the one that obviously is most interesting for a lot of people in these parts is the Florida Panthers ended up beating the Tampa Bay Lightning 6-2 at Amalie Arena. Matthew Tkachuk comes back his first game. Jacob, what are your thoughts about what took place down in Tampa?
I actually had a little thing here. You need to kind of half repeat the deal because we're getting a storm here right now. Say it again.
Sure, no problem. Florida Panthers 6, Tampa Bay Lightning 2. Lightning were actually favored to win this series. Florida leads the series 1-0, but Matthew Tkachuk makes his return after being out with an injury from the Four Nations. So give me your thoughts about how you size up the Panthers Lightning series. We know it's going to be
the thing about it is the fact that we just talked about Florida by itself. It's like, until then, to me, they're favorites. Maybe them, maybe Winnipeg, but just from that thing, there's no shock. It's like all I'm seeing right now is until otherwise, we talked about Paul Maurice, we talked about all of this. Until they can get beat, I think I consider it favorites. That's just truth.
Okay, fair enough. Mike Whitaker.
I think the biggest storyline so far in that series is just how bad Andrei Vasilevskiy looked. I think the Panthers had less than 20 shots on goal, and Vasilevskiy allowed 6, which is just unthinkable for him. Obviously, the Panthers got a tremendous boost by getting Matthew Tkachuk back. Second year in a row that they've met each other in the first round of the playoffs, and the Lightning did not take advantage of their home ice during the game. And they're the champs for a reason. It's the Stanley Cup is theirs until somebody takes it from them. And based on their performance in Game 1, they have no intention of letting the Lightning knock them down. So,
George Eichhorn.
Well, yeah, I think you nailed it there, Whitaker. They are the champions, and until somebody can take them away. 47 wins, 31 losses. During the year, Florida had a really good season, but Tampa Bay did also. This is really, to me, it's kind of like unfortunate on two counts. Two counts is that they both deserve to advance in the playoffs. The other count is they're both from the same state, so a lot of the hockey fans are split, and obviously what their state's going to lose one of their teams rather quickly here. I still think it's going to go 7 games, but I think the Panthers have the edge. But this is going to be a real war, I believe. But I'm giving Florida the advantage, the Panthers, that is, to win it 4-3.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, first of all, this is why I'm thankful that the NHL went back to divisional playoffs for 2 rounds. Because until they did that, the Panthers and the Lightning never played a playoff series.
Right.
How great is it now? They've both been competitive, for one thing, but that they've met so often in the last 10 years in the playoffs. That's great for the sport of hockey in Florida. It's great for the rivalry. And it's great in other markets when you can have those matchups. I mean, you guys are Detroit guys. I'm sure you're fond of all those matchups you used to have in the Norris division back in the days. You have to fight your way out of your division for 2 rounds. And that's what we have again for the most part with the divisional playoffs. And everybody's like, oh, it's not fair. We should line them up 1-8 and all this other BS. This is what people want to see. This is what makes NHL playoffs so great. And who cares if once in a while the Minnesota North Stars make it to the finals with a 500 record? Who cares? That being said, I do agree with George. I think this is going to be a long series despite what happened in Game 1. But what happened in Game 1 is the Florida Panthers played playoff hockey and the Tampa Bay Lightning did not. There's not a lot of space on the ice in playoff hockey. The shots were like 21 or 22-17. Florida Panthers got the better goaltending. They scored 3 goals on the power play. And they were a much more aggressive and physical team. And that's how you play playoff hockey. So that's why they won. And from the physical standpoint, getting Tkachuk back had a lot to do with that. But they played a better playoff game than Tampa did. They got the goaltending. They scored on the power play 3 times. And they were the more aggressive and more physical team.
Okay, Candy.
So I'm going to put my candy hat on first. So let's remember, Tkachuk missed the last 25 games of the regular season. So that means there's other people in there taking his place. So that means their bench was deeper because the bench players had more time. One of the things Tkachuk said is, you miss competing. You miss the fans, the energy, the emotion, the battles with the other team, the chirps on your own bench. It's just so much stuff that you miss. He played with so much more energy, and I think because he missed it. One of the things that Paul Maurice said is that Tkachuk's impact is as a difference maker. He's got an incredible set of hands, got an incredible gift for the emotional needs of the game. When you need a hit, when you need a big play, he's been great for us, and he's been there. So I think him coming back elevated the team that much more. And in playoff hockey, it's the little things that give you the edge. You got to do everything right. But I think they played with a better edge. I'm hoping they take the series. Let's see what happens tomorrow night in Game 2.
And JB.
Now the JB. This should be a fun series, and hopefully it becomes a heated rivalry. I like the Panthers in 6 over a Lightning team that has seen better days.
Okay, fair enough. And just a little teaser, we're going to be, Mike, just so you know ahead of time, we're going to talk about Steven Stamkos on next week's edition of the Sports Exchange. So I want to bring that up. We didn't have time for it this week, but just a little something to prepare you for. All I can tell you, Sergei Bobrovsky's a money goaltender in the playoffs. And until anybody tells me he's not, that's one thing. but this series is definitely going to be a war for sure. I mean, I've seen these teams play during the regular season, and the amount of fisticuffs that go on, to me, reminds me of that old book. I don't know, Mike, if you ever saw that book, Blood on the Ice, many years ago, but it almost gives you that feeling. That's what it seems like out there nowadays. So, but I expect the Lightning to come back stronger. For game one was a wake up call. It's about adjustments. Now, if the Lightning get into trouble tomorrow, this thing could be a short series for sure. So we're going to lighten this thing up a little bit with the pundit segment. Mike, you don't know what it is? It's a very lighthearted segment. And Pundits was a show that Jacob and I and George did a while back. We talk about something other than sports, but because we're bringing you on for the first time, since we started the show off on a tough note with Steve McMichael, this one is as soft a note as you can get. And let me tell you, people, a 19-year-old took his 85-year-old grandmother to a prom because she never got to go to one when she was young. Austin Dennison, 19 of Ohio, invited his 89-year-old grandmother, Dolores. Oh, my goodness. Grandma Sophie, I never went to a prom, but now when I read this, I would have taken you to one. But I still would have worn jeans. I don't believe in dressing up. That's me. She wouldn't have cared. I would have taken my Grandma Sophie to a prom. Love you, Grandma Sophie. Rest in peace. And I thought of this story. I thought of my Grandma Sophie. I haven't talked to her in a while. Great stuff. All right, Mike, what do you think about this? Would you take your grandmother to a prom?
Sure. I think it's very nice for this guy to take his grandmother to prom. My question is, what the hell is a 19-year-old doing going to a high school prom? He's still in high school at 19 years old? That's a little bit of a problem.
That's true. Isn't 19 a little bit old for high school? I never thought about that.
Even worse if she's 89 and still in high school.
All right, well, good. All right, well, now that you mentioned it, Jacob, it's your topic. What do you think of it? Yeah, that's true. 19-year-old.
Well,
The only way I could think of that is if he missed the deadline in December and he's one of the oldest in his classes, because I fell victim to that. I should have graduated high school in 1980, not 81. That's the only thing that comes to mind. But, Mike, I breathe you. 89 versus what? 19? Or no, 85.
talk about robbing the cradle. Let's go to gunpoint. But still, I love it because I was close to my grandma too. I was close to my parents, close to everything. I'll tell you this. I didn't go to my own personal prom. Like I went to somebody else's, but I didn't go to my own personal one. So I get to this point and he's probably very close to her. And I love hearing stories like this because there aren't a lot. You hear this because we hear too much anger in news. We hear too much anger. We're hearing them where they're stabbing their parents, stabbing their grandparents. They're getting angry. They're doing all this stuff. It's good to see somebody that's, just loves, and it's like, now we're getting this point where it's like, let's do a lighthearted deal of the day. What if we ignored some of the heat once in a while and started showing more? And that's the one thing I can say with media by itself. If it bleeds, it leads. Remember by itself, you had all the smoke inside of the place with the click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. You were in that world. But the big thing about this by itself is the fact that there seemed to be more respect than there isn't any kind of respect right now. So what if we change things up a little bit? What if we made these a front page a little bit? People will say, oh, it wouldn't make the same money. Maybe not at first, but maybe people either love it so much or they get out because they're so bored, they get out and touch grass for once. Maybe we need to think of something along those lines.
That's why I brought it up tonight, Jacob. This is lighthearted. I have other stuff that we can get to, but this one just got to my heart. And considering I've had head injuries, at least it took my mind off the head injuries and go ahead and put the mind on my heart. Candy, you don't have to wait last on this one. This is an unbelievable thing here. I mean, think about the guy. The kid's 19. He's taking his 89-year-old grandmother to a prom. First of all, I never went to a prom, so it doesn't matter. No loss to me. But if I had taken my grandmother, I might have thought differently. All right, Candy, what do you think?
I think it's a beautiful gesture because I think in a lot of things in society, we don't show our elders the respect that they deserve. And to share this special moments like this with a grandmother that had never gone to prom shows a lot of character for a young high school age kid because let's face it, in a day and age where a lot of people pick on people, a lot of people bully people, a lot of people talk down to other people, he did a grand gesture that meant a lot to his grandmother. And that's what it's all about. It's all about making family happy, and doing what you can to help them be happier. So I think kudos to him. On the JB hat, that's what life should be about, taking care of your family, especially your grandparents as they age. This kid is all class taking his grandmother to the prom and letting her have that experience. Stories like these are the ones you wish the evening news would lead with. The world might be a better place.
Good, that's
Candy,
the
just
reason.
go get a hat that says JB and put it right in the front and just put it there.
Wow, I'll tell you what. That's why I like my book, Old School Media versus New School Media. I believe in bringing this stuff on. All these fake news outlets get on my nerve. I'd rather eat my cooking than read some of this garbage. All right, Mike Whitaker.
Kind of just building on what everybody else has said. I mean, taking obviously was a very nice gesture, and I'm sure that she appreciated that. And kind of going back to what Candy just said there, it'd be nice if we had more high character people like that in the world, especially in the on the younger side of things. I'm sure it was a very, very well-meaning thing to do, and hopefully the person in question here kind of takes that mantra with him for the rest of his life here.
George.
Yeah, just to repeat and echo your sentiments, most of you said that this is a great thing for him to do. And what a thrill for his grandma as well. So hats off to this young man. And just a quick plug, NBC News has a good news story. Every Saturday, the guy summarizes all good news that came out during the week. So this is definitely a candidate for that. This is a great story. I'm happy for the kid and grandma.
No, I was just saying, George, I'm glad that they do something like that, but just Saturday, I'm like, the reasoning I said something along those lines with that is maybe it doesn't make amount of the same amount of money, but maybe long term it either does, or it's the idea of people getting out on their feet and meeting others, like getting out on grass. That's what my thought process of this is. Media used to be the loss leader, needs to go back to that. Maybe 60 Minutes ruined something, but I'm just going to say that right there.
I'll just say 60 Minutes is my favorite show.
It is, but just the idea of what they used to do and then being number one, that kind of ruined the idea of a loss leader.
Let me tell you something. 60 Minutes was the reason I ended up watching the Masters tournament the last round. My goodness. We had some good and by the way, we had some good numbers on that show. 60 Minutes to me is something that I could lock into and talk about everything that's right about old school media, because you're talking about good, hard, new stuff where these reporters ask the right question. Mike, you did comment on this one already? Santos?
Yes.
Good. So now you can comment about hockey operations. What's the latest update?
Not much going on, but we will have a big announcement in probably the next 2 weeks. So stay tuned.
We're going to make sure we get it first. So with that said, we welcome JB Ellis back. That way Candy only has to wear one hat, but when he's not here, she'll wear the other. So anybody have any quick parting shots? We do parting shots. If you don't have them, no problem. We'll wrap up the show with how everybody can get a hold of each other.
I'll do mine. I'll do mine, and then I'll do the parting because we went way past I thought. But here's the parting shot, and as I'm going to say this tonight, a lot of people, I was reading this little deal about AI in our movies and what's going on right now. And there's a lot of people that are in traditional idea of the traditional movie, the traditional television show. They're worried about AI and what it could take over, the writing, any of that stuff. Here's the thing, and a lot of them are just panicking. And this is the problem that we have with internet because we're on it too much as people. Panic. They're not thinking in context. Here's the thing to realize, people. It's going to make the independent and the regular movies that we know of even better. It's going to be because there's going to be people coming out there. There's going to be a market for those type of movies. The ones that are written, the ones that don't have any AI, the ones that have a low budget. There's going to be plenty of that market. It's good, especially when Hollywood's in trouble right now. It's going to be a little bit of a war between Marvel and the AI and all that stuff, and the movies that were made way back in the day and the type that you have. There's going to be that, and the sports is going to be that. Everything's going to be that. People panic too much because of AI. Eventually, an AI and everything is just going to be there. We can't do anything about it. But until that point, just realize there's people that are going to what they call troll, and they're going to want that type of stuff. And then you're going to want to be in that world because it's going to be interesting. The movies are going to be the ones that generate the most right now because you're going to see a battle and you watch it in the next 5 or 10 years.
Mike Wigger, any parting shots?
I guess kind of building on what was just said a moment ago, as far as AI is concerned. I mean, I'm kind of split on it, but I think kind of like what you said there, it's going to be developing a bigger presence in our lives, and I think it's just something that most people have to get used to.
Okay. George, any parting shots?
Well, the only parting shot I have is hats off to the Pistons. A lot of people wouldn't give them a snowball's chance of hell to even beat New York in Madison Square Garden, and they did in Game 2, setting up a return to Detroit now with the series tied 1-1. So the Pistons are for real, folks, and this is going to be a very interesting series, the 7-game series.
Right, and you'll be there tomorrow night, is that
Yes,
correct?
yes,
Okay.
I will.
Good stuff. All right, Candy, any parting shots? I'm not worried about JB, whether he has any or not. Fact of the matter is, I don't think he sent one, and we didn't ask him, I don't think. So
No, he didn't. My parting shot would just be enjoy anyone that's attending the NFL draft, enjoy Green Bay. Enjoy all of the history and all that it has to offer. There are a lot of things to do there, even though some people say that there's nothing to do in Green Bay. There's a lot of things that they did for the draft. They even canceled school, garbage collection along some of the roads because the roads are shut down for the draft isn't happening. So just enjoy the whole experience.
Mike, you have anything on your mind you want to get off your chest? Parting shots? Anything?
Which one?
Parting shots? Anything you want to say about sports or anything that you want to get off your chest? Say anything about? It's open.
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know what Mike you were talking about. No, NHL playoffs have begun. Probably the greatest time of the year in sports. So enjoy the playoffs for the next 2 months, especially the first round when there's hockey every night.
All right. Tell you what, I have one, and it's a pretty interesting one. I'll give you a good reason to laugh at the New York Jets because they're the only NFL, NBA, or ML team to not make the postseason during Pope Francis' tenure. Get that! In his tenure as the Pope, the Pontiff, the New York Jets never made the postseason. Oh, Nelly! I had to get that one off. Rest in peace, Pope Francis, and more importantly, rest in peace, Steve McMichael. Well, that does it for this edition of the Sports Exchange. We welcome JB Ellis back. Mike, you're going to really like this guy. He's one of my partners, so he can talk any sport you want. We have a lot of good things we're going to talk about next week. I'll be working on those. So with that said, Jacob Christopher, I know you got to get out of here shortly. So why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
I am here on the Wednesdays. I also do the I'm sorry. I do the Confidential, and I do this show on the Wednesdays. My big time. I'm also working my way back into the acting world, and I'm probably going to start writing again soon. Just letting you folks know. So life's good, and I appreciate, and good to meet you both, Mikes. This is the Mike. This is the Mike and Mike that no one knows. We can just put it that way. So it's good to meet you both.
Hey, Jacob, we like to introduce you to a lot of new people, and I'll tell you one thing. Mike Santos has been a longtime friend of mine. you talk about relationships. We've been good friends for a long time, Mike, and I'm proud to have him as my buddy. And Mike Whitaker is a prospect on the rise. So with that said, we'll turn over to Mike Whitaker. Let everybody
You have a
know
good night, everybody.
All right, good night, Jacob. Thanks
Yeah.
for being here. All right, Mike Whitaker, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
On Twitter at MWhitaker_89. I'm going to be start posting a lot more of the work that I do for the Detroit Monitor, which also gets posted on the South Florida Tribune as well. And like George mentioned, you'll be at the Pistons game tomorrow. I will be there covering on Sunday afternoon for Game 4 of the Pistons series. Let's hope for a win. And email mwhitak2@emish.edu.
Okay, well, you know, Mike Santos, you probably have a lot of contact information you want to get out there, so please feel free to put it out there.
Just the easiest way to reach me is at msantos@hockeyoperations.org. If you've got anything to do with hockey or questions about hockey, let me know.
All right. Look forward to seeing you next Wednesday night, Mike. We're going to have another great show. I know we had a lot of topics that we were on last week's agenda, added a couple more, but I'm glad we got all those covered, and we're going to be a little more versatile next week. All right. George Eichhorn, let everybody know how they get a hold of you, and then Candy will take us home.
Sure. I write for the South Florida Tribune on the contributors section, and I also have a book out there that came out several years ago, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. And there's a link to that book that Candy puts that link at the end of my columns. Feel free to order a copy. You can reach me at gicorn@yahoo.com or on Twitter at SanGSports99. And also on LinkedIn and Instagram and those kind of things as well.
Okay, Candy, take us home.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by our host, Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth. The foreword was written by George Eichhorn. Talks about Scott's 40-plus years in the media business and how it has changed and evolved. Get your copy today, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. There's also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. If you see the red subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner, click it, like us, share us with all your friends and family. We're always looking for more subscribers. If you want to advertise, call Scott 954-304-4941. And if you want to be a guest or have show ideas, you can always email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com.
All right, I want to thank Mike Santos for hanging with us a little longer than we normally do, but we had a lot to get to, and I think he certainly was well aware that we had a lot more as we get to the playoffs and as well as the conclusion of the regular season. Next week, we're going to have 5 people probably on anyways, and we're going to be a little bit more versatile with the topics just to give you an idea. So with that said, anything else you want to add, Candy? You want to talk about the chicks or anything?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, so with that said, that does conclude this edition of the Sports Exchange. I want to thank Joshua Dorr and Ralph Williams for their participation in the chat room. So on behalf of George Eichhorn, Jacob Christner, Candy Ebling, Mike Whitaker, and Mike Santos, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. We will see you next Wednesday night. Have a great week, everybody, and enjoy the hockey playoffs, let alone the NBA playoffs and the NFL draft. Good night, everybody. Hey, Rick.